Somewhere along the way, you were given 4 pieces of advice about dressing a soft middle, and I would bet you have followed all 4 of them for years. Buy it loose, go dark, wear it long, and whatever you do, never tuck anything in. Every single one of those is wrong, and I mean actively wrong, not merely unhelpful. Loose creates a tent, and a tent has no shape at all, so the eye assumes the widest part of it goes all the way through. Dark hides detail, and detail is precisely what you need if anybody is going to see a shape rather than a silhouette. Long removes the horizontal break that tells the eye where your body narrows, so you become one continuous column from shoulder to hip. And never tucking means the eye never finds a waistline anywhere, so it invents one at the widest point it can see. 4 rules, followed faithfully, and between them they erase the exact thing you were trying to keep. And here is what makes me want to talk about it. The women who follow all 4 of those rules are usually the ones who care most, who are trying hardest, who have spent the most money in the attempt. They are not doing nothing. They are doing 4 things, and all 4 are pulling in the same unhelpful direction. So I want to give you the actual mechanism, because it is not complicated and nobody ever explains it. A waist is not a measurement. It is a contrast. Your middle does not have to be small for you to have a visible waist. It only has to be smaller than something directly next to it. And that is a thing you can build with a seam, a tie, a hem, or a fold on a body of absolutely any shape. So I am going to give you 7 tops that build it. Not 7 ways to disguise yourself, 7 garments that produce a genuine visible waist on a real body with nothing underneath, no sucking in, and no lying down on the bed to do up a zip. Number 4 is the one I would most like you to get to, because it is the one almost nobody thinks of as a waist maker at all. It looks like the opposite, and it is the single most reliable of the 7, particularly if you are somebody who does not want anything close-fitting anywhere near your middle. So stay with me for that. Let me start with the mechanism, because all 7 make sense once you have it. Here is the principle, and it is worth saying slowly. A waist is a contrast, not a measurement. The eye does not know how many inches around you are. It has no way of knowing. What it does is compare adjacent parts of a shape and note where one part is narrower than the part beside it. Whatever it finds, it calls that the waist. So the question is never how small your middle is. The question is whether there is anything nearby for it to be smaller than. That is why a tent-shaped top is so unkind. There is no variation anywhere on it, so there is nothing to compare, so the eye takes the widest point it can find and applies that width to the whole thing. You have not hidden anything. You have told the eye to assume the worst and then given it no evidence to the contrary. And it is also why the whole business is far more within your control than you have been led to believe. You are not trying to make your middle smaller. You are trying to give the eye a narrower point to notice. Those are completely different projects, and only one of them is possible. There is one more piece of this, and it catches almost everybody. Your narrowest point is probably higher than you think. Most women look for their waist where they wore their jeans at 30, which is somewhere around the navel. But for the great majority of women over 60, the middle has softened lower down, and the genuinely narrowest part of the torso has migrated upward, to somewhere between the bottom of the rib cage and an inch or 2 below it. That is often several inches higher than where you have been putting belts and ties your whole life. Here is the 5-second test. Stand in front of a mirror, put both hands flat on your sides just under your bust, and slide them slowly downward, pressing gently inward as you go. There will be a point where your hands come closest together, and then they will begin to move apart again. That closest point is your true waist, and it is the only place worth putting a line. Every one of the 7 tops below works by putting something at that point, or by removing the eye's ability to look anywhere else. The first is the wrap top. If I could put one garment into every wardrobe of every woman over 60, it would be this, and I say that having thought about it for a long time. A wrap top crosses over at the front and ties at the side, and it does 3 separate useful things simultaneously, which almost nothing else manages. The first is that the crossover creates a strong diagonal line running across your torso, and a diagonal is the single most flattering direction in clothing, because it moves the eye across and upward rather than straight across. Horizontal lines add width. Diagonals subtract it. The second is the V shape the crossover makes at the neckline, which opens up the chest, lengthens the neck, and pulls attention up towards your face and away from your middle entirely. And the third is the reason it beats every other option. You decide where the waist goes. There is no fixed seam, no set position, no manufacturer's idea of where your narrowest point should be. You do the test I just described, you find your own closest point, and then you tie it exactly there. Every other structured garment in the world guesses. A wrap top asks, 2 things to look for. Choose a fabric that drapes, so viscose, jersey with some weight to it, or a soft crepe, and tie it firmly enough to define, but not so tight that the fabric strains, because strain creates horizontal pull lines, and those add width, which undoes the whole thing. And if you find that a full wrap gapes at the chest, look for a mock wrap, which has the crossover stitched in place and a separate tie. You lose the adjustability, but you keep the diagonal and the V. The second is the blouson top, which is any top gathered into a band at the bottom. This is the one that women skip because it sounds like it would add bulk. It does the exact opposite, and here is why. A blouson top is cut generously through the body and then gathered into a narrower band or an elasticated hem at the very bottom. So the fabric puffs out slightly above the band and then pulls in sharply at it, which means the garment itself is creating the contrast. Wider, then suddenly narrower. That is a waist, manufactured entirely out of cloth, and it happens regardless of what your own body is doing underneath. And because the fabric stands away from you above the band, nothing is touching your middle at all. No cling, no outline, no reporting of contours. For a lot of women, that is worth more than anything else in this video, because the fear is rarely about width. It is about the fabric showing exactly what is underneath. The critical thing is where the band sits. It has to land at or above your true narrowest point, never below it. A band sitting at the widest part of your hips creates the contrast in exactly the wrong place and makes everything above it read as one solid block. So try it on, and look for the band at your rib cage or just below. If it lands on your hips, size down or leave it, because no amount of styling will move a seam. The third is the empire line top, with the seam sitting directly under the bust. This is the oldest trick in this video, and it is old because it works. Women were wearing this line 200 years ago for precisely the reasons it still works today. An empire line has a seam immediately below the bust, and the fabric falls freely from that seam downward. So the narrowest point of the garment is placed at the highest possible position on the torso, which is very often the narrowest point on a woman over 60 anyway, and then everything below that point is skimmed rather than fitted. What that gives you is a waist that reads as very high and very small, and a long, uninterrupted vertical fall below it. Long vertical falls make people look taller and narrower. It is the same reason a floor-length curtain makes a ceiling look higher. There is a genuine caution, and I want to give it to you honestly, because this garment can go wrong. If the fabric below the seam is too voluminous or too stiff or gathered too heavily, an empire line stops reading as elegant and starts reading as maternity. The difference is entirely in the amount and the weight of the fabric. So look for a version with a modest, controlled fall rather than a lot of gathering, and in a fabric with some weight to it that hangs straight down rather than standing out. A soft cotton, a crepe, a fine knit. Not a light floaty voile with meters of fullness. Which brings me to the fourth, which is the one I promised you, and it is not shaped like a waist maker at all. The fourth is the long line open shirt or waistcoat, worn open over something else. I know. It is long and it is loose. And I opened this video by telling you that long and loose were 2 of the 4 bad rules. So let me explain why this is different. Because the difference is the whole point. The bad version is a long, loose top worn on its own. That is a tent, and it has no lines in it. This is a long, loose layer worn open over a fitted layer underneath, and that changes everything, because an open layer is not one shape. It is two long vertical panels with a gap down the middle, and what sits in that gap is a narrow strip of whatever you are wearing underneath. The eye reads that vertical strip as your width, not your actual width, the width of the visible strip. So you get to choose how much of yourself is on show, and whatever you choose is what gets recorded. That is the most powerful optical effect in clothing, and it is available to every single woman regardless of shape. Two vertical lines running from shoulder to hem, and a narrow vertical channel between them. It makes people look taller and slimmer, with no compression whatsoever, and there is nothing touching your middle at all. It also has a practical advantage that I think is undersold. It is a layer, which means it satisfies the very reasonable desire to have something on. And unlike a cardigan wrapped around the middle, it works with you rather than against you. Two conditions. It has to be genuinely open, never buttoned and never belted around the outside, because the moment you close it, you have made a tent again. And it needs enough length to create a real vertical, so somewhere between the top of the thigh and mid-thigh. A short open jacket ending at the waist gives you nothing. Look for a long line waistcoat, a long unstructured shirt worn as a layer, or a long line cardigan with no belt. And what goes underneath should be relatively close and relatively plain, so the strip in the middle stays clean and vertical. The fifth is a top with a defined shoulder seam and a deep V neckline. This one works from the top down rather than at the middle, and it is the most overlooked mechanism of all. Everything about how wide a torso reads starts at the shoulders. A well-defined shoulder, with the seam sitting exactly on your shoulder bone, gives the eye a clear, crisp corner at the top of your frame. And once the eye has a defined top corner, it reads the whole body as tapering downward from it, which is what a shape is. When the shoulder is undefined, dropped, sloping, collapsing softly down the arm, the eye has no corner to start from. It looks for the widest point instead and starts there, and the widest point is usually the middle. So an undefined shoulder does not just fail to help. It actively hands the job of defining your silhouette over to your stomach. Then the V neckline does the second half. A V is two diagonal lines converging downward, and the eye follows them inward and upward to the point where they meet, which is somewhere on your chest, near your face, and a very long way from your middle. Deeper Vs work harder than shallow ones. A shallow V near the collarbone gives you a small effect. A V reaching down towards the top of your bust gives you a long converging line and does far more. So when you are trying something on, check two things in the mirror. Is the shoulder seam on my shoulder bone, and does the neckline point downward rather than running straight across? A round or a boat neck runs straight across, which is a horizontal, and horizontals add width at exactly the level where you least want it. The sixth is the A-line swing top in a fabric that drapes. And I want to be precise here, because this sounds like the tent I warned you about, and it is not. A tent is a shape that is roughly the same width all the way down, hanging off the widest part of you. An A-line swing top is narrow at the shoulders and widens gradually and evenly as it descends, and crucially, it hangs from your shoulders, not from your middle. That distinction is everything. When a garment hangs from the shoulders become the reference point, and the fabric falls away from the body in a clean diagonal on each side, so those diagonals become the shape the eye reads. Your middle is inside the garment and simply is not part of the outline at all. The whole thing depends on the fabric, and this is where it succeeds or fails. It has to have enough weight to fall straight down and hold that A shape. Something too light will float and cling and lose the line the moment there is any breeze or any static. Something too stiff will stand out from the body like a bell and read as bulk. The test is the same one I have given before. Hold it up by the shoulders and let it hang. If it falls into a clean A with soft vertical folds, it will do the same on you, and this is the option for anybody who genuinely does not want a waist defined at all, on any given day. You are not building a contrast here. You are removing your middle from the conversation entirely and putting a clean geometric shape in its place. The seventh is the half tuck. This is not a garment, it is a 2-second thing you do to a garment, and it is the closest thing to free in this entire video. Take any top that is long enough and tuck in only the front or only one side, leaving the rest out. Not neatly, loosely, so it blouses slightly over the waistband. Here is why this works, and it is a little counterintuitive. A full tuck puts every inch of your middle on display against the waistband, which is why so many women abandon tucking altogether. Leaving everything out means the eye never finds a waistline at all. The half tuck does the one thing neither of those can. It shows the eye exactly one small piece of evidence that a waist exists, and then hides everything else. One glimpse of a waistband is all the eye needs. It registers that there is a narrower point there. It fills in the rest by assumption, and assumption is always kinder than inspection. And the asymmetry is doing real work too. A symmetrical horizontal line across the middle is the least flattering thing available. A partial, uneven, casual tuck creates a diagonal instead, and it reads as effortless, which is a quality that money cannot buy and a 2-second gesture can. Do it with the front only, or the side only. Pull a little fabric back out so it drapes rather than pulls, and it works best over a high-waisted trouser or skirt, because then the waistband you are revealing sits at your true narrowest point rather than below it. Now let me give you the thing I promised, because it is the most expensive mistake in this whole area. Stop buying the next size up. Almost every woman does this, and the logic feels sound. The next size up will be less tight, less revealing, less likely to cling. So you go up, and it feels better in the changing room, and you buy it. But a larger size is not simply a bigger version of the same shape. Every measurement grows, including the ones that were fitting you perfectly. The shoulder seam moves further out and drops down your arm, which we have established destroys your frame. The bust seam moves lower. The waist seam moves lower and wider. So the one thing you wanted, more room in the middle, arrives together with 3 structural changes that all work against you. The result is a garment with no defined corners anywhere. And no corners means no shape, and no shape means the eye picks the widest point again. What to do instead is buy for your shoulders and your bust, which is the part of a garment that cannot be altered easily, and then choose styles that are cut generously through the middle by design. That is exactly what every one of the 7 tops above is. A wrap, a blouson, an empire line, an open layer, an A-line. Every one of them gives you room in the middle without giving up the structure at the top. Room by design, not room by size. That is the whole distinction, and it will save you a great deal of money. So let me bring it all together. A waist is a contrast, not a measurement. The eye does not know your size. It only compares adjacent parts and calls the narrowest one your waist. And your true narrowest point is probably higher than you have been assuming. Put your hands on your sides and slide down until they come closest together. And that is the spot. The 7 that build it. The wrap top, which gives you a diagonal, a V, and the freedom to put the waist exactly where you want it. The blouson, which manufactures the contrast out of fabric and never touches you. The empire line, which puts the narrow point as high as it can go and gives you a long vertical fall. The long line open layer, which turns your outline into 2 vertical panels and a narrow strip that you control. The defined shoulder with a deep V, which builds your frame from the top corners down. The A-line swing top, which hangs from your shoulders and takes your middle out of the outline altogether. And the half tuck, which shows the eye one glimpse of a waistband and lets it assume the rest. And stop buying the next size up. Buy for your shoulders and choose shapes that are generous in the middle by design. Now the last thing, and I mean this. Not one of those 7 asks you to change your body, and not one of them requires anything underneath. There is a whole industry built on the idea that a woman over 60 needs to be compressed into a shape before she is fit to be seen, and I have never once seen it make anybody look better. It makes them look uncomfortable. Because they are. Every one of these 7 works on the body you have got, today, at the size you are. That is not a consolation prize. That is the entire point. So tell me in the comments which of the 7 you already own without realizing it did anything, because I suspect a lot of you have a wrap top sitting unworn in a drawer. And tell me if the hand test moved your waist higher than you expected, because that one surprises almost everybody. Subscribe if this was useful, because I make these for women who are done being told to hold their breath. I will see you in the next one.